Let's Talk, Facebook Live. Um, Wanted to do this video a few days ago, but unfortunately wasn't able to because I think it's important. Again, it's why I title these Facebook Live sessions as Let's Talk. There's a lot of stuff that people don't know, don't realize what is happening around them. There's a lot of things that are going on in people's minds, a lot of things that are going on in the world today, particularly with the COVID situation. And, you have all these new variants that are popping up. And, for those that think that this situation that we're in is somehow wasn't planned, then, you have been officially been brainwashed. And you can wear that badge that says, I'm a sheep. Okay? I want to talk about propaganda. And this is something that I think a lot of us, though we hear the word propaganda, we may understand or may not understand what it is. But even if you do understand what it is, okay, you're not even fully aware of the power of propaganda. Consciously, I don't think we are aware of the power of propaganda, right? Because again, propaganda is based off of deception, lies. Uh, it is a psychological tactic. It is psychological manipulation, and it is a very, very powerful tool in turning entire population against any group of people. It's powerful in turning any neighborhood against an individual or group of people. So we tend to not have a full understanding of the power of propaganda. And so this is why I want to talk about this in this Let's Talk. So you see here, there's an article of a young man who, let's go back up here, who basically killed his kids. All right. It says California dad killed his kids over QAnon and serpent DNA conspiracy theories, Fed claims. Now, I see particularly a lot of black people I see on Facebook, they're doing live and they're talking about reptilian, shape shifters and all this stuff. People being cloned. And, it's the reason why these things are conspiracy, again, is because there is no actual proof or evidence. All right. So it's conspiracy. Now, conspiracy can become conspiracy fact or factual if there is proof and if there's evidence to say, okay, this conspiracy is absolutely correct. We now have the proof, and now we understand. The danger of conspiracy theory, particularly those that are created by what I believe is a security agency and law enforcement agency in the United States, as well as those within the military, the higher ups, the white supremacists, who want to show that they can manipulate people to the point where they can get them to believe anything. Okay, and this is a big, big subject that people don't want to believe. Now, in 2009, I believe, 2008, there was a journalist, Michael Hastings, and he wrote an article for Rolling Stone. Okay, it might have been later than that, but he wrote an article for Rolling Stone called "The Runaway General." All right, it has to do with David Petraeus, and the fact that that article helped, uh, not help, but that article was one of the reasons for the career ending of David Petraeus. He was a U.S. general, and what was part of his undoing was the fact that they were using psyops on U.S. Congress persons and senators. Why? Because they wanted to increase the military budget. Uh, they wanted to increase the military budget as if the military budget wasn't enough. United States military budget exceeds over $630 million to date, and that's a year, right? $630 billion a year. And the budget keeps increasing. So again, it shows you how psychological conditioning, how these things work, right? That through various psychological tactics, the military is able to get Congress and the Senate to increase their budget. I make no mistake about it. The U.S. Military budget is more than the top countries all put together. More than China, Japan, Great Britain, France, Germany put together. Okay? So propaganda and psychological manipulation, it is a very powerful tool that we tend to downplay, tend to not take it seriously. But what happens when you have military personnel or ex-military personnel who are trained in psychological manipulation and who are using their training to radicalize people, to get them to believe lies, conspiracy theories. Actually, I shouldn't even say that word, but propagandize theories, right? Created, these are things created through propaganda. And what happens when, people take it seriously because they have lost their grips of reality to where killing people is, it's like a thought that they'll have in their mind to go to the store and buy something to eat or drink, and they just do it without any remorse or anything like that. So I'm going to read part of this, and then I'm reading another article, and I'm also going to show how white supremacy plays into this. Okay, let's do this. Okay. Authority says Matthew Taylor Coleman confessed to murdering his two young children in Mexico and told investigators he thought they would grow into monsters. A California surfing school owner who was charged with killing his two children in Mexico is a follower of QAnon and Illuminati's conspiracy theories, who thought the children were going to grow into monsters, so he had to kill them, federal officials allege. Matthew Taylor Coleman, 40, was charged Wednesday with foreign murder of U.S. nationals in connection with the death of his 2-year-old son and his 10-month-old daughter, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Central District of California. Authorities said Coleman confessed to the killing and told the FBI that he used a spearfishing gun to stab them. A spearfishing gun. The criminal complaint alleged that he told the FBI that he had killed his children because he believed they were going to grow into monsters. And that conspiracy theories led him to believe that his wife had passed down her serpent DNA to the children. Coleman's wife, identified only by her initials, contacted Santa Barbara police after her husband had taken the kids out on Saturday but didn't tell her where they were going. The complaint said she grew concerned after he failed to respond to her messages, and knowing that her husband didn't have a car seat with him, she called the police. The missing person report was filed Sunday, and officers asked her to use Apple's Find My Phone features to see where she could find Coleman, the complaint said. The program showed Coleman's last known location was Rosarito, Mexico, it said. Police alerted the FBI to the investigation as it became a case of suspected parental kidnapping. Coleman was detained Monday after inspection by a border protection agent of his van upon his re-entry into the U.S., where agents didn't see his children and found blood in the vehicle. Okay, we continue here. Serpent DNA, it is likely to be a reference to the lizard people. Conspiracy theories have falsely thought that reptilian aliens secretly run the world and have taken over important positions in government, banking, and Hollywood. So where did all these theories come from? To understand that, you gotta go and look at the security agency, particularly the CIA, in its history of mind control and brainwashing, and how they have been, even the military. So let me not forget about that also. Even the military. And the purpose of this is that to show that you can radicalize someone, brainwash them enough to where they can actually commit murder, and not just killing one person, but they can commit mass murder. Many of us sit around and we hear about these shootings, and we say, okay, this is a crazy person. Nobody in their right sane mind would engage in such behavior and such tactics. But you got to understand that one of the ways in which those within the US government who have experiment on people, non-consensual human experimentation, particularly those running psychological experimentation, and the use of psychiatry, the use of labels, psychiatric illnesses, is a big reason why they continue to get away with these things. Okay? For those of you who may not even understand these things, realize that, I should say that, but understand that a lot of these mass shooters, when you go and you look at their background, family members may have been part of the military, may have been part of research that deals with the mind, and not just the individual themselves, but also their children, right? This is important because those who are connected within society, within government agencies within the military, who have been working on, these so-called, particularly in the field of neuroscience, right? And understanding how the mind works, being able to manipulate the mind, creating uh, technology to control the mind. Because they will always try to say this is for, we're going to, do this for the good of humankind, the good of mankind. But there's always a dark side to these things, which you'll never hear, and it's expected because they don't want you to understand and know what is going on behind closed doors, right? What is going on in secret, and it's the reason why these things are being held in secret that we don't know about. And when we try to, petition through the Freedom of Information uh, Act, the FOSA Act, they'll always come back, well, we can't comment on these for the matter of national security. And once they start using the national security heading or public safety, what have you, heading, you cannot go further. You cannot pursue any longer because that's it. Okay? This man, again, he's the owner of a surf shop, right? 40 years old. Took his two children to Mexico, killed his two children because he believed that their mother had serpent DNA. Right? So where did he get that ideology from? That idea from? And why isn't law enforcement seeking to find out who put this idea in his mind? Also, if you look in California, if you look at the military industrial complex, particularly in those areas, because there's a lot of military installation in California. A lot. Then I'm going to read another story, with this one involving a black man. Here we go. Lancaster. Father accused of fatally shooting his 4 children. Mother-in-law charged with murder. DeMarcus Lamar David was charged with 5 counts of murder and 3 counts of assault on a child causing death. Lancaster, California. The father who was accused of fatally shooting his 4 children, including an infant and his mother-in-law, at a home in Lancaster, have been charged with murder. On Tuesday, 29-year-old Jamarcus Lamar David was charged with 5 counts of murder and 3 counts of assault on a child causing death. Now, again, when you read this, you see repetition. Okay? After they just said that this man has been charged with murder, you see a repetition, okay, in the next sentence down. So when you read these things, you need to, particularly with media and how they try to program people, you have to look for repetition. Okay? Because with repetition comes psychological conditioning. Right? So the shooting happened Sunday night at the family's home in the 3500 block of Granite Lane. The children's mother returned home to find the bodies of the children, all of whom were under the age of 12, and their grandmother, and immediately called 911, according to authorities. A neighbor said she heard a woman run back and forth in the front yard screaming, "My babies are gone, they're all dead." The victim has since been identified as 51-year-old Erica England. 11-year-old Namia, 7-year-old Jamarcus Jr., 2-year-old Caden, and 1-year-old Noah. The father turned himself in to Los Angeles County Sheriff deputies within minutes of his wife's arrival at home. He remained jailed on $2 million bail on Tuesday. Okay, let's go to here. Here's the interesting part. Okay, it says that what appears to be David's Facebook page includes a photograph of a crucifix and post. Okay, a photograph of a crucifix and post from late October and early this month, offering spiritual and moral views. Just know that God loves you when you feel unloved for, David said in a November 6th post. The love I give will overflow from one heart to the next as a gift that keeps giving. I will be one of the reasons that others believe in the true goodness of this world. David posts October 27, adding, that is what I want my legacy to be. That is what I want my children to grow up seeing. So here's a man who is so deep within his religious faith or religious belief. And again, looking to what he's saying about that he wants his children to grow up to see. So why all of a sudden did he just kill his children as well as their grandmother? Why? See, these are questions that we should be asking. These are questions that should run through our mind whenever we read something like this. This person who was trying to be an inspiration to others, okay, who wanted to see his children grow up so that, let me take this, who wanted to see his children grow up, to see his, to see what he accomplished, so that they can see his legacy. And they are also his legacy, his children. So the fact that he's saying, I want to see, that I want my children to grow up seeing what he says, he'll be the reason that others believe in true goodness to this world. Yet, kills his children and their grandmother. Then he turns himself into the police. When we see and hear things like this that doesn't make sense, particularly from what this individual is saying, and I know many people, the one thing that the U.S. government have been very, very good at, particularly the security agencies with the CIA, the Department of Defense, the FBI, Department of Justice, is that they will put psychiatrists and psychologists out there and they will say, well, no one can brainwash anyone to commit murder. No one can brainwash anyone to go against their core moral values, a moral standard. And we know this is not true. But there are a lot of people, too many people out there that believe this. And if you look up Darren Brown, okay, he's what you call a mentalist. You can find his videos on YouTube. He does all these social experiments. And again, there's nothing that he's doing that's new. From the Stanford experiment to the what's the other one? The Stanley Milgram experiment, the Stanford prison experiment, the Stanley Milgram experiment. We see time and time again, and they continue to again do these experiments every decade to see if the result will be different. right? So in the Stanley Milgram experiment, you had people who were told by those in the authoritative position that they have to administer electric shocks to individuals, right? And they were told that if they administer this amount of electric shock, that it will actually kill the individuals, or that have the potential to kill the individuals. And what they find is that when the um, when the position of responsibility is removed from the individual, right, and placed squarely on the person of authority, that the individual will follow commands that will kill someone. And then the Stanford prison experiment it deals with how when placed in the position of authority, right, that power and the position and power will lead to corruption, will lead to atrocities, right? So these things are, again, you have to understand how we can be conditioned, you know, in any way and every way, regardless of what you may think, regardless of what you may say. Your mind is strong, and no one can manipulate you. Believe me when I say we're all being manipulated. Okay? And the fact that if a person cannot admit that they can be manipulated, that's a person that you need to stay away from. That's a person who, when a person who is going to manipulate them in a certain way and they don't recognize it, and you try to warn them and tell them, hey, this person's trying to manipulate you, they're not going to listen to you. These are the people that you need to stay away from. Okay? These are the people that you don't want to be around or need to be around. Because if they're being manipulated and they have no clue or understanding, just as I was, just as how a lot of us was when, in our younger years, there's a reason why they say the older you get, the wiser you get, right? But today we'll see the older this population gets in this society, is they don't get wiser, they get dumber. They are becoming dumber and dumber, right? So anyway, sorry to sidetrack, but the point is that anybody can be manipulated, anybody can be brainwashed, to use a more friendlier term, anybody can be coercively persuaded, right? Because they don't use brainwashing anymore, because it has too much of a negative connotation and stigma to the word. So now they use what is called behavior modification or coercive persuasion. So when I read things like this, it disturbs me, because, and particularly, again, this happened in California, right? Particularly in an area where you have uh, a lot of military, um, the military industrial complex. So where you have the vast majority of employers within that area is the military industrial complex, whether it be the private um, military, what's the word I'm looking up? So the private military contractors. Okay, that's what I meant to say. The private military contractors, and like I said, there is a reason why you'll see these things in the news, because they have to do this every once in a while. You know, something so outrageous, and the fact that they brainwashed and manipulated a black man to do this, it's further in their agenda to continue to demonize black men. Now you see the white guy who killed his kids. right here. Again, so this idea of, conditioning people to kill their kids, these are what I will say is ritual sacrifices. I'm not a religious person, but I know that people who believe in religion and believe in sacrifices and these things, and they're sacrificing, they're manipulating these individuals, brainwashing them, right, to sacrifice their kids for a reason. So, what is their agenda? And this is where propaganda comes in. Because what we are moving into is in a society where it will be acceptable when they start labeling people. And this is where it's heading to. It's going to be heading to what is called uh, BCI, brain computer interface. And they will say, well, it is to, we're going to implant these people who we labeled as, that have a mental illness. Okay. And this will get the society to go along with that. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that means that if they can label you, for example, the FBI labeling Black Lives Matter as an extreme uh, um, black identity group, whatever the hell that means. I guess they don't want to say terrorist, so they say black identity, right? It would be nothing for them to now say, well, now we have the support of society, including black people, that anyone who we arrest during a protest, we're going to microchip. Anyone who we say is a threat, we're going to microchip them. So you got to look at the agenda that is going to be pushed going forward. So when you hear these things are coming out, remember this video. Remember I talk about this. Okay? And these individuals, within the military, within the private military, weapon contractors, the white supremacists within the U.S. government, the Senate, and the Congress, the white supremacists up in the higher levels of the military, of law enforcement, Department of Justice. If you go back and you look at their history, they have all been conducting mind control experiments, creating technology in order to control the human mind. And so, what do? Right? You select individuals that you can radicalize, that you can brainwash to get them to commit horrible crimes. And then you demonize a group of people under a certain heading. So it can be, African Americans, black people, people with mental illness, and you demonize them. Therefore, when you move to get rid of those individuals or to keep them under control by whatever means necessary, because the one thing that they'll do is that you'll hear them say, well, the end justified the means, right? That's what they'll say. And we know when those in the authoritative position take those stands, how they've conditioned the rest of us in society is to accept it. Okay? Is to not speak out against it. So, how do we combat these things? How do we, when we read stuff like this, look beyond what the media is saying or writing, and start asking yourself, just reading between the line. All right. And you can't go by how a person looks. Because, you look at this guy, he looks happy. He has a surf shop. Obviously, he's where he lives, he's doing pretty well for himself, just like the other guy. But then they turn around and do horrible crimes like this. Why do you think that is? Do you think that they just flipped? They just went crazy or mad, as they would put it? No, it's through indoctrination. It's through propaganda. It's through lies. It's through deception. But no one within the police departments, within the FBI, no one is looking at who is really pushing these lies, these propaganda, because the people that are pushing these things, that are conditioning people to these things, are part of the military. Either they're actively involved in the military, or they are retired military um, personnel that are no longer, in the military. And we see this because we see one of the in the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. One of the people arrested was a woman who was an army. Uh, she worked in the PSYOPs division of the U.S. Army. Okay. I always say that sooner or later, if people don't realize what's happening, and it's going to be sooner, you know, than later, that we're all going to find ourselves back into an American version of Nazism. We start to see the use of the patriotic theme, particularly in sports, when the military start getting involved in sports activity. You start to see the American flags on helmets, on jerseys of these athletes. And when you look at these sports programs on television, you'll see how they constantly zoom in on the American flag, whether it be on their shirt, their sleeve, on the front of the shirt, the sleeves, on the back of the helmet. Okay? There is a reason why those images of the American flag is put there. Right? This is how you instill, this sort of patriotic theme, of fascism. Okay? This is it's basically fascism disguised as democracy. Right? Just studied Hitler's program and what they did to the German people, how they create what is called the deception of self. Okay? All you got to do is just look at that. Just, this is why it's important to study history, because, if you don't understand history, the bad things in history will repeat itself, and you'll be caught, with your with your head in the sand, you know. So we have to understand these things. And like I said, for a person to do this, and then the other guy, the black guy, after this happened with this white guy, this black man, again, it's the further demonization of black men. And this was done for that reason. So we have to be fully aware, be fully aware of what's taking place, of how our minds are under attack. All right, so let's talk about propaganda and how Germany convinced the masses. And I'm not going to spend what time it is. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Let's see, am I still alive? Okay, I just had a message saying my streaming software was disconnected. No, it's back. It's back up. Anyway, propaganda. How Germany convinced the masses. Okay, let me turn off my webcam. By Tracy Martin. You can find this at ScholarWorks Library. Abstract. During the 1930s and 1940s, the National Socialist German Worker Party launched a full scale propaganda campaign in conjunction with their military and political efforts as a means to subdue, indoctrinate, and control the masses of Germany and the European countryside. It is through this utilization of propaganda that Nazi Germany created a political machine that pumped out propagandistic messages frequently enough to sublimate the atrocities of the Holocaust into acceptable responses to the perceived Jewish problem. This usage of propaganda led to a united German identity, founded in a response full of hatred towards the Jewish people. This look into the power of propaganda shed appropriate light on the psychological impact of repeated information, especially in times of economic stress and war. Okay, let's talk about this with the two stories I just read. Okay, so what you do is particularly how propaganda is used today by the elites and those within the high ups of the military and law enforcement. And again, this is fear based conditioning. There was a story about Michael Flynn, right? And what he said was that America should be under the religious ruling of Christianity, right? That America is a Christian nation and there's only one God, and that's what Americans should believe. We shouldn't have any other belief system uh, besides Christianity, right? Which is, to me, is white supremacy. A lot of us don't even understand that, but Christianity is white supremacy. And what you are seeing today is the radicalization of people, particularly religious people, and it doesn't matter what ethnic group you belong to, is the belief in this one God, right? Whether it be the Christian God, and we all know that in Islam and Christianity it's the same God, because in Islam foundation is the Abrahamic uh, belief system as well as Christianity, right? And so what they've done is what they're doing is to create a multicultural multicultural uh, cult, I would call them, religious cult. That doesn't matter if you're Jewish, Pentecostal, uh, Islamic, particularly here in the United States. But what it is to bring them all under one umbrella in this one God, the same God, right? And so what they've done is that they've infiltrated every sector of society, every religious organization to create propaganda and spread propaganda. And so, with these two individuals committing these acts, and again, one was, believing his faith, yet goes and kill his children, their grandmother. But they only give you little bits and pieces of information, and you see it as I read that article, you see how things repeat itself within the article. Okay. Also, propaganda, as they said, has been around for centuries, past millennia, existing both in times of peace and war, and continues to position itself at the forefront of culture, society, and most importantly, politics. The implementation of propaganda in Nazi Germany before and during World War II represents an incredible phenomenon of hatred and racism. During the first half of the 20th century, anti Semitic propaganda rapidly grew in Germany, culminating in the eventual Holocaust of the 1940s. Propagandistic pieces led to a warped sense of reality based on the manipulation of one's ideology or current situation. This psychological manipulation led to both soldiers and civilians. Okay, participating in the Holocaust. The power of propaganda represented a crucial boiling point of human morality in Nazi Germany by utilizing technological advancement in radio, cinemas, mass printing, and other visual stimuli. The National Socialist German Worker Party, the Nazi Party, waged a home front war to convince the populace that of who they believed was the true enemy, the Jew. This clever use of propaganda throughout Germany in the first half of the 20th century acted as the driving force behind the Holocaust, fostering a national identity forged in hate and racism. Isn't that the same thing here in the United States? See, we live in the United States. We that live in the United States, particularly us as Black people, we think that when we think about how America treats Black people, we don't think about the propaganda that America creates, right? That the white supremacy creates. Okay, we just we may not see a lot of Black people on television at one point, and we're like, oh, we need to put more Black people on television. And then when we do put more Black people on television, it isn't to counter the white supremacist narrative of Black people, but to reinforce it. Okay, and that should tell you something. That should tell you that even though you may have Black people who are on television, but they are not doing anything to counter the white supremacist propaganda and the negative imagery that they put out when it comes to Black people. But what we have is that Black people on television reinforcing the negative stereotypes created by white supremacists and white supremacy to basically manipulate the minds of people within the United States and those outside the United States, non-black people, to view black people in a negative light. Because instead of black people trying to do things different, we are trying to assimilate into a society that is detrimental to our life and to our survival as a people. Okay, and those, the very few that do tend to want to put out something different, they don't get a chance unless what they create can be changed to benefit white supremacy and white supremacists and degrade black people. We see this with Dave Chappelle. We see because of his documentary film that the fact that he is doing this, he's putting this out on his own. We see all the pushback against it and how they try to use the excuse of his comedy show and try to tie that in together. You know, we have to be intelligent as a people to say no. We're not going to fall for that. You know, we're going to support our brother. Okay. And the saddest thing about that issue with Dave Chappelle is it was a black person that created all this controversy. Again, it just shows you that black people would put everything else in front of their blackness because they've been duped into believing that they belong. They don't even look at the reality. Why? Because of psychological conditioning. And this is why I continue to speak about psychological conditioning until we understand, until we realize that, hey, you know, we need to stop being easily manipulated, stop being easily conditioned, even if it means we don't get to, you know, live in this neighborhood or be among this group of people. Because ultimately, by us not realizing these things, we're killing ourselves slowly. And we're passing that ignorance down onto our children. And if you can see, the outcomes for black people, particularly black children today, is less than when you and I were children. Okay? So things are not moving upwards for us, it is moving downwards. But because of our psychological conditioning, we don't even see it despite the evidence, despite the proof that says otherwise to what's going on in our mind. We don't even want to know about it, right? Because what they have done is created what is called the deception of self within us, okay? And I'm going to talk about that too. So let's continue. So what is the definition of propaganda? The typical definition of propaganda, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is the spreading of ideas, information, or rumors for the purpose of helping or injuring an institution, a cause, or a person. Adolf Hitler, leader of the Nazi Party in Germany, described propaganda as a truly terrible weapon in the hands of an expert. George Orwell, English author of the popular novels Animal Farm, 1984, described propaganda as lies, even when one is telling the truth. Perhaps the greatest definition of the concept of propaganda is by Richard Allen Nelson, in which he says, let me read that here. He says that propaganda is neutrally defined as a systemic form of purposeful persuasion that attempts to influence the emotions, attitudes, opinions, and action of specific targeted audience for ideological, political, or commercial purposes through the controlled transmission of one-sided messages, which may or may not be factual, via mass and direct media channel. Do you guys understand this? When we see what's happening today, more so than it happened in the 90s and the early 2000s, the use of media, particularly social media, how it has been weaponized against anyone, but particularly against black people. Okay? How we see black social media artists or creators, I should say, are having their work stolen by white people, other groups of people, and they're making money off of it, except for the people that created it. And the reason why black people we're not making money off of the content we create on social media, at least the majority of us, is because of propaganda. The fact that other groups of people can see, look at what you do, not support you, steal your ideas, steal your, whether it be a dance, what have you, your dances, make millions off of it. Okay? Not even giving you credit for it, but you're still on that very same platform creating new content so that they can steal it all over again. Because you have been conditioned by propaganda that makes you think that what you create, that you shouldn't get paid for it. But yet other people will take that creation that you've created and get paid for it. So I want you to understand how propaganda works, because it works in many ways. It's not just uh, having your image, your likeness, you as a person being demonized, but it's also how it's used against you in terms of your mind, your inner self, your inner thought, you who you are, that you don't see yourself as worthy. Okay? So that when somebody steals your idea and they're making money off of it, you do nothing. Because it's white people that, to be honest with you, that's stealing most of the creative content by black people. And they're getting paid. They're getting recognized. And you as a black person who've created this content, you're not. You're not hiring lawyers to say, you know what, I'm going to sue this individual. This individual is making money off of something that I've created. And the fact that, how is it that YouTube can and Instagram can give you a copyright strike if you play a song by an artist, right, who's signed to, you know, a big label, but yet somebody can copy your shit. You know what I'm saying? And they don't get a copyright strike for that. So another thing is that if you create something online, before you put it online, copyright it. Copyright it. You have to think in terms of, you know, your financial viability, your financial future, because they're making money off of your shit. Okay? So propaganda, if you know, as I just read. Okay? It is, I'm gonna read it again because it is probably the best definition. So propaganda is neutrally defined as a systematic form of purposeful persuasion that attempts to influence the emotions, attitude, opinion, and action of specific target audiences, or ideological, political, or commercial purposes through the controlled transmission of one-sided messages, which may or may not be factual via mass and direct media channel. So again, how does this tie into the two articles I just read about these two young men, who end up killing their kids, and because it's propaganda. Okay, it's true propaganda because they did do that. But guess what? No one is talking about how these individuals were brainwashed, were manipulated. They may mention conspiracy theorists, what have you, but you have to have a deep process in which you can um, make someone believe something so strong that you radicalize them to where taking a life is something that's, you know, they're not even thinking twice about it. They just do it. There is a brainwashing process that takes place. Okay. And again, this is being done for a reason. There's an agenda that's coming down the pipeline that we have to be aware of. And me personally, that agenda to me is, with all the technology that they've developed, the number one thing is to be able to use certain technologies, microwave, radio wave frequencies, for mind control, microchip it, all right, computer, brain, BCI, brain computer interface. In order for us to say that, hey, we need to control these individuals because they're violent or have violent nature, even though these two didn't show it, they seem like normal people. And that should tell you something. All right. So I don't want to go into too much of this because, again, people start saying, oh, I'm a conspiracy theory, but anything I ever post, whatever, is factual. There's nothing that I say that I can't back up. Okay. And I mean, there's nothing that I say that I can't back it up with proof and evidence. All right. So let's move on. And again, you can find us online at ScholarWorks. Uh, and the reason why I studied, excuse me, the reason why I studied particularly Nazi Germany, especially with Hitler and the Nazi Party, because it goes back further than that. See, many people, when they talk about Hitler and the Nazis and Nazi ideology, the Nazi ideology came out of the American ideology, the eugenics movement. This is what a lot of us are not taught in school. And why would the white supremacists in America teach you that? Right? Hitler didn't come up with this idea on his own. There's a very famous film in the 1920s, right here in New York, Madison Square Garden. Okay, where you have American Nazis with the Nazi flag in Madison Square Garden. This is prior to the war. Okay? So understand that. So when we talk about the Nazis and the Nazi ideology, it's American ideology. So don't be fooled. They thought they were free. Right? The Germans, 1933 to 45, by Milton May. But then it was too late. See, in this society here, in American society, we like to think that we're in a dictatorship. I mean, a dictatorship, democracy, and that we are free. But again, that is the illusion, right? It is the illusion. So let me just read a few excerpts from this extract here. What no one seemed to notice, said a colleague of mine, a philologist, was the ever widening gap after 1933 between the government and the people. Just think how very wide this gap was to begin with here in Germany. And it became almost wider. Who knows? It doesn't make people close to their government and to their government to be told that this is a people's government. See, the reason why, again, I study these things and I'm talking about these things because we see this is happening here in the United States. See, when you don't study history, you don't understand history, these things, these horrible things of the past will happen again. You start to see a widening between the disconnect of the government and the people. Now, the United States have not had a government for the people in decades. And this is why we're seeing this widening, just as how there was a widening between the people and the government in Germany before the Nazi became the establishment. Okay. A true democracy ought to be enrolled in civilian defense or even to vote. All this had little, really nothing to do with knowing one is governing. What happened here was the gradual habituation of the people, little by little, to begin to being governed by surprise, to receiving decisions deliberated in secrets. Talk about the secret court in the United States. To believe that the situation was so complicated that the government had to act on information which the people could not understand. Or so dangerous that even if the people could not understand it, it could not be released because of national security. And their sense of identification with Hitler, their trust in him, made it easier to widen this gap and reassure those who would otherwise have worried about it. This separation of government from people, this widening of the gap, took place so gradually and so insensibly, each step disguised, perhaps not even intentionally, as a temporary emergency measure or associated with true patriotic allegiance or with real social purposes. And all the crisis and reforms, real reforms too, so occupied the people that they did not see the slow motion underneath of the whole process of government growing remoter and remoter. Okay? So I just wanted to read that because, again, we see this happening today. At least I hope those of us, you know, in the know, sees this happening and can, reference these things, because if we are not um, diligent in trying to make people understand these things, these things will happen. The creation of these uh, groups, these programs within the government, these secret courts, these secret programs that they have, and then trying to radicalize people, the infiltration of religious groups into every level of society. So when I look at Scientology, if we ever watch Scientology with Leah Remini on A&E, you'll see, they talk about how Scientologists, how they infiltrated the IRS, the FBI. Okay. And so what you have today now is those within the military, the security forces are using civilians or radicalizing civilians into these secret programs. All right. The use of military personnel, right? Active and inactive, teaching psychological operations to civilians. And why do you think that is? You know, I just got this book. I've been wanting to get it for a longest while. It's by Edward Benet, and it's a title of propaganda. And Edward Benet, he is the nephew of Sigmund Freud. Okay, so if you really, really want to understand how dangerous propaganda is, we need to start doing research on these things. As Black people, where are my Black psychologists, Black psychiatrists, Black professors, understanding propaganda created by white supremacy and how it affects us, how it is changing the minds and hearts of people around the world to view Black people as in a negative light, to where you have people in China blaming Africans for COVID. When we know that's not true. That Africans are not the ones spreading COVID, but it's Europeans and other Chinese people when this situation first came about. So we have to do a better job of understanding these things and spreading the information so that people can learn about, because the more people understand is the better chance that we will have of not having another Germany happen here in the United States. And trust me, it will be on Black people's head. It will be us, though it has always been us. But you'll see a speeding of these things, a quicker uh, um, replacement, right? Whether it be by these technologies in terms of programming us to be a um, under, I would say, I want to say underground, but a silent uh, slave population. That's the right word. A silent slave population. Okay, so we really need to think about this, and we really need to open our mind. And one thing I stress about is unity within us as Black people, about putting our Blackness first. And until we can do that, okay, we're going to continue to be used as tools, be used as guinea pigs, and one day, we're going to wake up and we're going to be like, what's happening? You know, how did it get to this? Again, it is because of our ignorance, and a lot of it is not our fault. I keep stressing that it is not our fault. Okay, but it is those of us who understand a lot of these things is happening that we have to wake up each other and help wake up the masses of our people, because believe me, when I tell you what's coming on the pipeline, you may not want to believe me, you want to call me crazy or what have you, and such, but when it happens, you will have no defense against it. There will be no defense against it, because there wouldn't be anybody that looks like me and you who have the technical skills and knowledge, the resources, the ability to create something to counter it. Right? So read this PDF. It's called "The Mind Has No Firewall." It's a book too, I think. It's called The Mind Has No Firewall. Okay? Let's go. All right. The Mind Has No Firewall. You can find this at press.armywarcollege.edu. Okay? It is completely clear that the state in which is first to create such weapon will achieve incomparable superiority. Major I. Chernyshev, Russian Army. The human body, much like a computer, contains myriad data processors. They include, but are not limited to, the chemical, electrical activities in the brain, heart, and peripheral nervous system, the signals sent from the cortex region to the brain to other parts of our body, the tiny hair cells in the inner ear that process auditory signals, and the light-sensitive retina and cornea of the eyes that process visual acuity. We are on the threshold of an era in which these data processes of the human body may be manipulated or debilitated. Examples of unplanned attacks on the body data processing capabilities are well documented. Strobe lights have been known to cause epileptic seizure. Not long ago in Japan, children watching television cartoons were subjected to pulsating light that caused seizures in some and made others very sick. Okay? You guys should read this. And it is going to make it very easy for them to implement these technologies on us. Okay? When they're manipulating people and brainwashing people to do things like this. Okay? So understand the agenda. Don't just look at these things as okay, this person did this person is crazy, what have you. No. Understanding the agenda. And how they're going to make society excuse me, very compliant in the microchipping of people who they will deem as being mentally ill. Okay? Now go look up mental illness in the black community. So who do you think they're gonna be microchipping first? At least the majority of the population that's gonna be microchipped. Who do you think it's gonna be? Once they start labeling you as that. And remember, and I've if you read the book, the protests, it's called Schizophrenia, the Protest Disease. Okay, how schizophrenia become associated with violence, particularly violence in black men, and what they see as violence, which is black people protesting the unjust and unfair treatment that they receive in this country. And that if you protest and you get arrested, they will label you as having schizophrenia or some other sort of mental illness. And so in order to demonize the people, what does the white supremacy has to do? It has to try and make the people who they say that those people are. Okay, just as in Nazi Germany, the Nazis had to make the Jewish people exactly who they say they are in the eyes of the German people. Okay, by propaganda, by the villainization. So when people are complicit and compliant, as Martin Luther King said, you know, when you're silent, that is the greatest injustice of all. Because when you see the injustice taking place and you're not saying anything, you're not doing anything, okay, that is an injustice in and of itself. So I'm gonna leave it at that, and you know, see you guys in the next talk. And I hope people really, when they watch my video, they just, you know, just open your mind a little bit and go and do the research and go and think. That's all. You know, that's all that we've ever asked. You know, those of us who are aware and understand what's going on, who are not easily fooled, who once was fooled, but you know, are no longer easily fooled because we wake up to the truth. We understand the truth. You know, and they'll attack you. See, when in any society in which uh, people know the truth and understand the truth and speak out against the lies, they're gonna always be attacked. They're gonna be always be labeled, which is fine. It's something that I think you have to accept. You know, if you're going to continue to speak the truth, continue to try and make people aware of what's really happening, what's really going on, and sometimes it can be a bit much. You know, but it is a job that we accept, and regardless of whatever's happening, you know, we understand that it's more than just us. We understand that it's more than just us. We understand that it's more than just, you know, our families, our friends, but it's each and every one of us. Okay? Because if you don't see yourself in the people that look like you, then you will be used against the people that looks like you. All right? Food for thought. See you guys in the next live.